Okay, here we have Ronaldo, arguably one of the best players of the modern era and the beautiful game that I love of soccer. So if you know of Ronaldo, okay, he is a superstar of the soccer game for his striking abilities, for his ability to score amazing goals in amazing situations. If you know a little bit about his background, he's recently moved across to Manchester United to play in their Premier League team. Obviously with the aspirations of winning trophies and performances, etc. But as a Liverpool supporter myself, it's slightly concerning to watch, but also pleasurable to see the team not performing so well and Ronaldo not performing to the very best that he was believed to do so. So there was all sorts of issues around that. And if you look at here, this was a famous quote that came out of a game where it was just like a pre-season game. The players walked off halfway through. So we saw here, Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag was left fuming after a handful of the first team players left a pre-season match early. They just walked off. In an interview, he described the act as unacceptable. We are a team, and that means you stay until the end. And this isn't the first time that this has occurred. His previous boss described him as, Ronaldo is not easy to manage. He is a multinational company with personal interests that must be combined with those of the team. So the performance that he's generating isn't matching what was expected, and it's hurting the team as well. So the team's performance is going down as well as the individual performance. And obviously we'd like him to come back to his full best, maybe not as a Liverpool supporter, but come back to his full best to allow Manchester United to achieve their place in the league. So this is what this section's all about, this lesson. It's about performance management and getting the best out of the employee and the best for the team. So we're going to be talking in this lesson about performance management, which is our next key knowledge point. Taking from the study design, we can see here we're going to look at 4 strategies related to performance management, how they achieve both business and employee objectives. We're going to look at management by objectives, performance appraisals, self-evaluation, and employee observation. So in a nutshell, performance management is about the assessment of how an employee present work performance is going, and how this can be directed in the future to achieve both business and employee objectives. So we want them to perform better, not only for themselves and so that they feel better about their work and what they're doing, but also so we can help the business achieve its objectives as well. So the first strategy we're going to look at is management by objectives. So this is a strategy that aims to improve the performance of a business by clearly defining objectives that are agreed to by both management and employees. So the idea being is we're going to sit down with an employee and say what the business objective is, and then say what the employer's objective is, which will hopefully match that business objective. So taking this example here, okay, so we have a business objective to achieve 10% increase in profits. We want to improve more, we want more revenue, we want to reduce our expenses. So one way to do that is to increase the amount of product we actually make. The idea being other things being equal, if we don't change the price, if we don't change the expenses, then hopefully by making more products, we sell more products and then we'll increase that profit. So we want to make 10% more products than we did before. Now, at this point here, we would have a meeting with the employee to say, okay, this is our business objectives, and these are going to be the objectives that we want you to have to achieve our business objectives. So clearly, if we want to make more product, we want the employee to increase their productivity. So sit down with them and say, okay, we would like you to increase your productivity by 10% over 6 months. The idea being if we increase our productivity, hopefully we'll produce more products, we achieve that goal, and then we can sell those products and make more profit. So everything is nicely aligned. So we're aligning the two together. And obviously the employee's job then is to increase the speed of their production on the production line to meet that target. Now, this is where it becomes really important, is that one, we clearly align these two together. We've got to have a business objective, and we've got to be thinking, what does the employee want? What can we get the employee to strive to achieve, and how can we really closely align those together? Also, what we need to be thinking about is when are we going to do a review of that? There's no point just setting an employee off to do those tasks and not checking in. So here, by having a very specific time frame of 6 months, in 6 months' time, we can sit down with that employee and say, have you met your target of increasing productivity by 10%? And then if not, why not? And then work on improving that process to eventually achieve that target. So what's the good things and the bad things about this strategy? Okay, well, we're trying to improve the performance of the individual and hopefully then improve the performance of the business as well. So by aligning these two, hopefully we're going to be able to tap into something that the employee resonates with. So they can see a personal link to it. You might link this to performance-related pay as a motivation strategy. And if you achieve your target, we'll link some pay to that. That could be aligning their interests. Or it could be exploring a bit more about the individual and what are your career interests, or how do you want to develop your personal skills, and how can those be aligned with the business objectives so we can achieve what we want to do as well. So it's the two bits together. Hopefully, when we've got a very clearly expressed target, a goal, a management objective, then it's very clear for the employee what's expected from them. So they're not going to be surprised. They're going to go, yep, I know exactly what's required, and I'm going to work towards that target. And by having these sit-down meetings between the two, hopefully we're going to get better workplace relationships, because the employee is going to understand the employer, and the employer is going to have a chance to really explain why the individual needs to strive towards that goal. So we're hopefully building better relationships. However, obviously that time to take to sit down with employee does take time, and it could take time away from other aspects of the business. So the slightly disadvantage of this is that time component to have a chat and to see what's going on. And obviously, if it is linked to performance-related pay, then that remuneration as a form of like an incentive, as of a reward, is going to increase your expenses a bit. And you've also got to think, for some employees, if they don't meet that target, do they feel there's repercussions going to happen to them, or they're going to feel like sort of sad that they haven't achieved their target? So it can sometimes be demoralizing if you don't achieve the objectives. But management by objectives is a very smart, strategically aligned strategy to try and achieve business objectives, and at the same time get the performance of the employee up to achieve their objectives, to align those with the two. Okay, our second strategy in performance management is performance appraisals. Now, some of you may well have had these in your part-time jobs or your employment opportunities where you've sat down with the boss to discuss how you're going, okay? So formally, this is a performance review, okay? Sometimes called a performance evaluation. And this is a method by which a job performance is documented against predetermined standards. So the idea being is there'll be a document expressing exactly what's expected from you for that job, and the skills and the tasks and the performance that you're required to do, and you're going to be evaluated against that. Okay, so you'll have a chance for input, a chance for discussion, and the employer will have a chance to explain, okay, where they think your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can develop for the future. So it's a very formal, systematic process. Now, these can sometimes be funny. This is going to be like sort of quite serious. Below, have a look at later on. I have an example from The Office about one of their classic comedy sketches about how an appraisal would work. And hopefully you can draw from that the good things and also the bad things that are expressed in that very classic comedy outline. But the idea being is if you can see that clip, you'll understand a bit about how that process works. You'll also understand some of the fears that sometimes come with an employee, that they're a bit nervous about the whole process, that they're worried that if their performance is not seen to be doing very well, what's going to happen to them afterwards, the sanctions that might occur, the punishments, or what might follow on if you're not achieving the goal. So performance appraisal, a very commonly used technique, a strategy for improving performance management, but it can sometimes have that fear that's aligned with it. So let's look a little bit further about performance management. The idea being it can serve many purposes for a business. This can give you an insight into how an employee is going and allows it to make a fair comparison with other employees. So the idea being is if everyone goes through the same process, well, then you've got a very clear and objective way of assessing employees, and you can target that against salary. This person here is going to get a pay rise because they're meeting their objectives. Or this person here can be considered for promotion because they're achieving these objectives. This is the strengths of the individual. This is the potential weaknesses of the individual. This is maybe some training programs we can do to enhance the performance of the individual. So all of those things can come along as part of that whole process. And if you do this regularly, every 6 months or every year, then you can build up a whole story of that employee with your business and how their career is going. It also offers a great opportunity to get feedback, not only from the employer to say, okay, this is where you're performing well, but also for the employee to express, okay, what might be happening at the moment in their working environment. Are they feeling a little bit demotivated? Are they struggling with additional pressures? Maybe there's some new technology coming along and they don't feel very comfortable with it. They might want an opportunity for some more training. So that's that lovely chance to have some feedback about how is the employee going, and to have a regular periodic assessment and see how that develops over time. So this can be a very good tool for improving performance, not only to achieve business objectives, but for the employee to achieve their own personal objectives as well. So again, let's look at the strengths and the weaknesses, the advantages and disadvantages of this strategy for improving performance management. Well, one, if you can imagine, that chance to sit down with an employee and review their performance is going to involve additional communication. So hopefully that chance to have that regular chat is going to improve workplace relationships. There'll be a better understanding between both parties. Also, if they find out to be a weakness or an area which isn't so strong, then we can identify further training for that employee to get better at that skill or at that certain task. And as we mentioned before, another benefit is we're going to get a broader concept of how the employee is going, so we can see if they're ready for promotion, and we can see if there's things that we can work upon to help their career. But also, if we're identifying a common weakness that keeps coming up, that there may be a follow-through for eventually, unfortunately, termination, where if they're not meeting what's required from them and they're having an impact on the business, we might have to consider that. And that's where that fear factor comes on that I was talking about earlier. Some employees associate with this, that if you're not performing well, what's going to happen to me in the long run after that? So it can be really good for workplace relationships, can also have a little bit of fear associated with it as well. Disadvantages. Well, one of the classics, obviously, it is time consuming. If you think that you're Qantas and you've got 30,000 employees and you've got to meet with each employee, and to do it properly, you're probably going to take half an hour to an hour to sit down one-on-one with an employee to talk about how they're going, assess their performance in different areas, etc. Then if you run around, that's 30,000 hours every year. Okay, and multiply that by, if you're going to do it twice during the year on a 6-monthly basis. So we're moving up to 60,000 hours associated with this. So this can be a very time-consuming process, especially for large businesses as you roll that out. So you've got to be conscious of that as you're going through this. And as I said before, it's sometimes the word performance appraisal instills fear in employees, that they feel they're being watched, they're observed, and why am I being brought in? Maybe I'm not performing as well as I should be, and what's going to happen to me? So that fear of failure to achieve desired promotions or possible dismissals can have a nervous reaction on employees. Okay, our next strategy for performance management is called self-evaluation, obviously from the slide. And on this one, I'm going to get you to work with me on this one. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at this one as a sort of a reflection on how we're going right now in business management. Okay, let's pretend I'm a student in your class, or you could do this one for yourself if you're going to do a little self-evaluation of how you're going right now. So let's have a little think about this one. Okay, so were you happy? Well, am I happy with the performance of my last sack? Yeah, not too bad. Could be a little bit better, but okay. So I'm going to put a little tick halfway between the two. Okay. Before the sack, did I check my knowledge using the relevant Edrolo theory and exam list? Of course I did. Okay, a full, firm, positive tick right at the top of the line for that one. Next one, did I complete all my homework on time? Did I listen when the teacher was explaining something? Pretty good, 50-50, so I'm sort of in there. And did I ask questions in class when I'm not sure of something? I'm one of those quiet guys that sits at the back, so maybe no. Now, what we've done here is just a very simple self-evaluation of how we're going in our class. Now, here I've identified some strengths that I'm really good at. I've also identified a couple of areas where I'm not so strong. So now if I'm thinking for the future, if I want to do better in my performance in my SAC and move it further up here, so I'm really proud of what I'm going, I can see what I can work on. So this idea of a self-evaluation is a really simple, nice, easily accessible tool where you can go, okay, these are my areas of weakness, these things I can improve upon, and then I'll hopefully get better. I can see the connections to that. Now, obviously, you can roll that out exactly the same for a business. You could have a very nice, simple spreadsheet or a simple little table here with some questions directed about the performance, and you allow the employee to do their own self-evaluation. Okay, so it's about the employee reflecting on their own performance, using a set of criteria that you make up beforehand, And then you often do this prior to a manager-employee discussion. So a really simple technique of just evaluating how you are going. Okay, so what's the strengths and weaknesses of this strategy about performance management? Well, as I've hopefully illustrated, it's a really quick and easy process. Nice and easy to administer. The employee's going to do all the work by going through their little self-evaluation. So you're going to save the manager's time as well. That's really good. But you're still getting an insight into how we're going. In addition to this, by allowing the employee to do it first and then bring along to the meeting for a chat, the employer's going to get an insight into how the employee is thinking right now. How are they registering themselves? So you're getting that sort of understanding of how they're perceiving themselves in the workplace. And this, unfortunately, leads to one of the disadvantages. So let's pretend right now that I had a mirror in front of me right here, and I'm looking at myself. Well, depending on my mood, I could do all sorts of things. I might be going, okay, today I just look wonderful. So I'm going to tick everything because I'm feeling so special about it, okay? And you might have that feeling of bravado or, of course, I'm the best worker I could possibly be. Tick, 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 because you're leading up to the individual. Equally, you could have that table we did before where somebody's going, no, I'm just really not. I'm just really not. It can be very demotivated or run down. So because they're doing their own assessment, sometimes you get overly humble people. Sometimes you get excessive people, believe it. You might even lie, going, okay, they really want to hear that about homework. I'll make sure that one's a full tick all the way through, just in case someone's assessing. We might be dishonest. So the idea of its accuracy is a little bit subjective, okay? We're leaving up to the employee. We might not be getting an honest assessment behind it, okay? So there's a very simple, quick and easy way of getting that first evaluation about how people are performing on their job. Now, the next strategy for performance management is employee observation. You may well have seen this yourself in your own part-time job, either with the employer watching you while you are actually performing on a task, or you might have even had a mystery shopper, which, talking from past students, they've used that before, like Baker's Delight, where this random customer comes in and is actually doing an assessment on your skills and performance at the same time as actually buying something. So what's the idea behind this one? Well, the idea is that we're actually getting accurate, honest feedback about how you're performing because we're observing you do it, okay? So this involves an employee being monitored and assessed against whatever the criteria may be that's preset while you're doing that job, okay? And then obviously then it can lead on to a discussion between their manager and employee about what the performance is and what can be done to make it better. So think about examples of where you've seen this for real, okay? So for yourself, it could be with your employee's knowledge, a pre-organized observation period. So if your boss has asked you to carry on your job and you're working at a cafe and you can see them just watching you while you're doing it, they might have a little like a clipboard seeing how you're going with your customer service. That would be this technique. They're actually observing you doing it. Okay. If you've ever had a student teacher in your class, the same thing at the back. The teacher will be writing down some notes about how the student teacher is performing. So in a business sense, we're talking here about, okay, are they meeting their objectives? Are they performing well? And you're literally watching them do it. Now, the other one is this, like commonly called a mystery shopper survey or a mystery shopper program, where people get employed to pretend to be a casual customer walking in. So as I said, they'll have signed up to maybe an agency. This is a freelance job you could even consider for yourselves, where you join the agency, they assign you a certain time or date to go to, let's say, Baker's Delight, and you walk in as a pretend customer ready to buy your loaf of bread and a couple of other items from the shelves. And as you walk away, you reflect and write down, maybe on a computer program, about how you were dealt with. Were they punctual? Were they well-dressed? How much customer service did they give you? So they've got some certain criteria. All that information gets fed back to the employer. The employer will then sit down with the employee to talk about that experience and whether it could be made better or not. So you can see clearly this is going to be a very accurate observation of actually how they're performing in that job. And that's one great advantage of this one. You're seeing what's really happening. So if we're looking at the strengths and weaknesses of employee observation, well, hopefully the first one that we can target here is it's hopefully going to be really authentic because they're literally watching you do that job. Whether it's a mystery shopper or the manager, they can see what you're doing. They're seeing firsthand what's going on. It's not hearsay from a self-evaluation report. It's not about what they casually hear about from colleagues for an appraisal or what they see on the passing thing. We've got a dedicated period of time for you to show and demonstrate how well you're performing on that job. So hopefully very authentic. There's also a chance here we can get it from a number of sources. So not only the manager watching, but we can have these mystery shoppers as customers. We can also even ask our peers to do some evaluation of how we're performing. So we can collect all this evidence of how are you actually doing on that job. Now, clearly, once again, strengths and weaknesses, we can identify areas for further training to how we can get better at a certain job. And also we can use that information to work out, wow, they're performing really well, they're ready in line for promotion, or they're not performing so well or missing our targets, and maybe we have to consider not using them in that role anymore. So all sorts of ways we can use it. Disadvantages? Well, once again, it can be time consuming. You've got to sign up for the freelance agency to do the mystery shoppers, or the manager's got to take time away. And remember, this is more than now just a 30-minute chat. This is also maybe sitting down for a couple of hours watching you individually. And again, for large businesses, you imagine rolling that out for 20, 30,000 employees. It's going to be very time consuming. And the classic one, you might well have experienced it yourself. What happens if that day where they come to watch you doesn't go quite right, okay? They've caught you on a bad day when you just haven't been performing so well, you've not been in the right mindset, some things are happening at home, or you've had a big night out and you're not performing at your best. So sometimes that can be then like spanned out, oh, well, that's how they perform all the time. Well, no, it's just a one-off occasion. So if that one-off occasion is the one that's been recorded, it might not be a fair reflection on how they normally perform. Equally, if you know that person is coming, either the mystery shopper or the manager's coming to watch you, that's going to be very stressful. And you might not even perform your best just because of the stress and the anxiety around that process. And finally, if you think you're being observed, you might not perform like you normally do. You might go an extra level to be really wonderful at your customer service, or really attentive to detail, or be really smart, just because you know you're being observed. And so you might lead to altered work habits from what's going on. So again, another strategy can be really useful, very authentic, but can be quite time consuming. Okay, so let's look at a worked example, how we might see some of that knowledge come across in either a SAC or an end of year exam question. Okay, so we've got a nice simple question here before us. We have a compare the two performance management strategies of self-evaluation and employee observation. So we're going to compare these two. Now, right at the outset, as we've said all along, we highlight the task word because it's drawing something out from us. So a task word of compare requires similarities and differences. So let's see how that gets scaffolded up. So let's just add our first bit here. Self-evaluation and employee observation are both formal performance management strategies. Both include records that are made of an employee's performance before them being discussed in the meeting with their manager. Absolutely accurate. What we have here, though, is just the similarities, okay? We've missed the differences. So this is a common error for students. They either miss one or the other one, okay? So we need both the similarities and the differences. So right now we can tick the similarities, but we have no evidence of any differences. So the maximum the student will get is 2 marks. So very simple, though, to scale that up to add the differences. And you might even do a line to separate the two to make it very clear to the assessor that you know that this compare question requires similarities and differences. So this time we now add, however, whereas self-evaluation can be conducted by the individual directly, we can do it ourselves. Employee observation requires an additional observer to track and record what the individual is doing, and therefore is a more expensive operation than self-evaluation. While self-evaluation has the potential to under or overstate performance based on the nature of the individual, the idea being that we're either being humble or we're being excessive, the employee observation may be a more objective assessment because we're seeing what they're actually doing. Although it can be prone to the employee performing to their best while being observed rather than at normal level. So what I'm trying to highlight here, though, is we have the similarities and we have the differences. Okay, and we need both for a compare question. Okay, so here we have a mega question. So this is going to require you to think a little bit more about all the strategies combined. So let's really take our time on this one. This one's not so simple, okay? So which of the following performance management strategies is not likely to be suitable if an employee is underperforming and the employee is considered dismissal for breach of contract? So something is definitely going wrong here. So which one of these is not suitable in this situation? If you got that one right, really well done, okay? And if you think about it, you can probably hopefully see why, okay? The other ones, we've got some objective assessment. Management of objectives, we've got the manager sitting down, setting a target, setting a goal, the employer having that goal, and every 6 months or so reviewing that. So we've got manager input and employee input, and the manager is making that assessment. So that would be getting evidence to tick that. So that would be okay. The appraisal is also having manager input and employee input as we're going through the criteria to make that assessment. The employee observation is an accurate assessment because it's been done by someone else, whether it's a manager or we're using the mystery shopper program for customers, literally watching that performance. The problem with self-evaluation is that it is the individual's own assessment, and that is prone to bias, whether it's a belief that you're better than you actually are, and equally when you're not performing and you don't believe in yourself. Now, clearly, when you think you're better than you are, it's going to cause issues because we may have an overriding assessment where we're not taking account of the things we're actually doing wrong and we're putting them aside. So self-evaluation is not a good one. If it's getting a little bit heavy and we think that a person is not performing well and possibly in line for dismissal. So what we have here, a nice summary of all that we've learned about performance management strategies. Hopefully one nice simple slide here. We've got the key terms we need to know about. So performance management is all about trying to improve the employee's performance to achieve the business objectives. How can we do that? Well, we've got 4 strategies in mind. We can do management by objectives. We can have the business objectives and we align that with personal objectives, and then we reassess over a period of time to see whether that individual has achieved them. We can have a performance appraisal, a formal systematic approach where we set some pre-designed criteria where we're going to assess the employee against that criteria. They may have a chance also to give some feedback about whether they think they're strong or not strong in those areas. And in that meeting, we then work out if there's room for development and further training required, or they're doing really well and we want to reward them or acknowledge their behavior. Self-evaluation. A really nice simple technique where you literally have the predetermined table or form, whatever it may be, and you allow the individual to make a self-assessment of how they're going. Now, the risk obviously is that it could be over-exaggerated or it might be under-exaggerated where they're feeling a bit down on themselves and not being so reflective. And finally, the 4th one, employee observation, where you literally watch the employee do that task and then give them some performance evaluation on behalf of it. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And you either get the manager to do it directly, you might get it done by peers, or potentially you might even get it done by customers in the mystery shopper program. So all of those are ways of hopefully improving our performance. I look forward to seeing you for our next lesson where we're going to have the area of termination management, a little bit more scary.